Hello there, and welcome back to Sleepwalk Space. The world outside can feel rushed and demanding, but here we move at a gentler pace. This is a soft place where wandering minds can settle into sleep or simply rest while learning something new. Tonight, we're exploring the quiet mysteries that hide in plain sight, the patterns that repeat across scales, the creatures that defy what we think is possible, and the landscapes that hold secrets older than memory. We'll drift through tide pools and ancient caverns, across grasslands and frozen peaks, discovering the small miracles that unfold every day without fanfare or applause. Some of what you hear may surprise you, some may linger like the last light of evening. And before we begin our journey, if this calm space helps you unwind or gives you a peaceful way to close your day, consider leaving a like or subscribing, or simply sharing a thought in the comments below. It helps others find this quiet corner of the internet, one restful soul at a time. Now, if you're settled in, let's begin. A drop of seawater can contain millions of living organisms. When you dip your hand into the ocean, you're touching an invisible world. In just a single drop of seawater, there can be millions of bacteria, viruses, microscopic algae called phytoplankton, and tiny animals like zooplankton. These organisms form the foundation of the entire marine food web. Phytoplankton alone produce more than half of Earth's oxygen through photosynthesis, making them as important as all the forests combined. Many of these creatures are so small that thousands could fit on the head of a pin, yet they travel vast distances on ocean currents, shaping global ecosystems. Scientists estimate there are more microbes in the ocean than stars in the known universe. It's humbling to think that in cupping your hands to hold a bit of seawater, you're cradling an entire cosmos of life, each organism playing its part in keeping the planet alive. Some trees communicate warnings through the air. When insects begin feeding on a tree's leaves, that tree can release chemical signals into the air that travel to neighboring trees. These airborne messages prompt nearby trees to start producing defensive compounds even before they're attacked themselves. Willows and poplars are particularly good at this form of communication, releasing volatile organic compounds that drift on the breeze. The warned trees respond by flooding their leaves with bitter tannins or toxic chemicals that make them far less appealing to hungry insects. Some of these same chemicals also attract predatory insects that feed on the plant-eating pests, turning the forest into a cooperative defense network. This silent conversation happens constantly in woodlands around the world, an invisible dialogue carried on molecules of scent, showing that trees are far more aware of their surroundings than we might imagine. Certain clouds can exist at the edge of space, high above where airplanes fly, nearly at the boundary between atmosphere and space. Rare clouds sometimes form. These noctilucent clouds appear only in the deepest twilight, shimmering with an electric blue glow against the darkening sky. They form about 80 kilometers up in the mesosphere, where the air is incredibly thin and cold, around minus 130 degrees Celsius. The clouds are made of ice crystals that form on tiny particles of meteor dust. When the sun dips below the horizon but still illuminates these high-altitude clouds from below, they light up like silver threads across the sky. They're most visible near the poles in summer months, and some scientists believe they're becoming more common as atmospheric conditions change. To see them is to witness something that exists at the very edge of where Earth meets the cosmos. Some animals can predict earthquakes before they happen. For centuries, people have reported unusual animal behavior before earthquakes strike. Dogs barking frantically, birds fleeing en masse, snakes emerging from hibernation in winter. While the science is still being studied, researchers believe some animals may be able to detect subtle ground vibrations, changes in electromagnetic fields, or the release of gases from stressed rocks before the main quake hits. In one famous case in 1975, Chinese officials evacuated the city of Haicheng after observing strange animal behavior, possibly saving thousands of lives when a major earthquake struck hours later. Fish have been seen leaping from water, elephants trumpeting and heading for higher ground, and cats carrying their kittens to safety, all before tremors began. This sensitivity suggests these creatures are tuned into signals from the earth that our own senses cannot detect. There are beaches where the sand glows blue at night. On certain shorelines around the world, the waves break in brilliant blue light, as though the ocean has absorbed the sky and is giving it back in sparkling foam. This phenomenon comes from bioluminescent plankton, microscopic organisms that produce light through chemical reactions in their bodies. When disturbed by movement, waves, footsteps, or a passing fish, they flash in defense or communication. The effect is magical. Each wave leaves a glowing outline on the sand, and every splash sends up clouds of blue light. Beaches in the Maldives, Puerto Rico, and California occasionally experience these displays. Walking along such a beach at night, with every step lighting up the sand beneath your feet, feels like moving through a dream where the laws of nature have been gently rewritten. Some flowers close their petals to protect insects overnight. Certain flowers don't just open and close for pollination, they also provide shelter. Flowers like crocuses and tulips will close their petals in the evening, and small insects caught inside are kept warm and safe until morning. For the insects, these flowers become cozy bedrooms, protecting them from cold, wind, and predators. In the morning, when the petals reopen with the sunlight, the insects emerge, often covered in pollen, and go on to pollinate other flowers. It's a gentle exchange, hospitality in return for help with reproduction. The flower offers refuge, and the insect offers its service, an unspoken agreement that has been honored for millions of years. Glaciers hold bubbles of ancient air. Deep inside glaciers and ice sheets, tiny air bubbles are trapped, preserved exactly as they were thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years ago. Scientists drill ice cores from places like Antarctica and Greenland to extract these bubbles and analyze the atmosphere of the distant past. By studying the gases inside, they can reconstruct Earth's climate history, measuring carbon dioxide levels, temperature changes, and even traces of volcanic eruptions. Some ice cores contain air that's nearly 1 million years old, offering a direct glimpse into a world long before humans existed. Holding a piece of glacier ice up to the light, you might see those tiny bubbles, each one a frozen breath from an ancient Earth, waiting patiently to tell its story. Certain butterflies migrate thousands of miles across generations. Monarch butterflies undertake one of nature's most remarkable journeys. Each fall, millions travel from Canada and the United States to specific mountain forests in central Mexico, covering up to 4,000 kilometers. But no single butterfly makes the entire round trip. The generation that flies south will overwinter in Mexico, then begin the return journey north in spring. Their children and grandchildren continue the migration over the summer, spreading back across North America. Somehow, the great-grandchildren of those original travelers find their way back to the exact same trees in Mexico that their ancestors left, despite never having been there before. Scientists believe they navigate using the sun's position, magnetic fields, and possibly even genetic memory. It's one of the most inspiring examples of endurance and instinct in the animal kingdom. Some lakes turn pink in certain seasons. Around the world, there are lakes that shift to vivid shades of pink, red, or even purple. This dramatic color change is usually caused by algae or bacteria that thrive in salty or alkaline water. Lake Hillier in Australia stays bubblegum pink year-round, while others change seasonally based on temperature, sunlight, and salt concentration. Lake Retba in Senegal turns deep pink during the dry season as salt levels rise. The microorganisms produce pigments to protect themselves from intense sunlight, and these pigments tint the water. Standing at the edge of such a lake can feel disorienting, as if you've stepped into a landscape painted by imagination rather than nature. There are forests where the floor is covered in moss so thick you can sink into it. In temperate rainforests, particularly in the Pacific Northwest and parts of New Zealand, moss grows so abundantly that it forms deep, soft carpets over everything. The forest floor becomes a cushioned landscape where your footsteps are muffled and fallen logs are transformed into long, green mounds. Some moss layers can be half a meter thick, holding moisture like a sponge and creating a habitat for countless insects, salamanders, and fungi. Walking through such a forest feels like entering a fairy tale. The air is cool and damp. The light filters green through the canopy, and every surface is softened by layers of living velvet. Certain fish can survive being frozen and then thaw back to life. In the coldest parts of the Arctic, some fish have evolved an extraordinary survival strategy. Species like the Arctic cod produce special proteins in their blood that act as natural antifreeze, preventing ice crystals from forming in their bodies even when the surrounding water is below freezing. Other fish, like certain species of sculpins, can actually survive brief periods of being partially frozen. Their metabolism slows dramatically, and they enter a state of suspended animation until temperatures rise again. This ability allows them to endure the harshest winter conditions, waiting patiently under the ice for spring to return. Some caves contain entire ecosystems that have never seen sunlight. Deep beneath the surface, in isolated cave systems, there are ecosystems that have evolved in complete darkness for millions of years. In these lightless worlds, life has adapted in strange and wonderful ways. Blind fish navigate by sensing water pressure changes. Pale insects and spiders hunt without eyes. Bacteria feed on minerals seeping from the rocks, forming the base of a food web that requires no photosynthesis. Some of these caves were sealed off so long ago that the species inside exist nowhere else on Earth. Exploring such a cave is like discovering an alien world, where evolution has taken a completely different path in the absence of light. There are deserts that bloom with wildflowers after rare rains. In some of the world's driest deserts, seeds lie dormant in the soil for years, even decades, waiting for rain. When storms finally come, often just once every few years, these seeds germinate almost immediately. Within days, the barren landscape explodes into color. Carpets of yellow, purple, orange, and red flowers stretch to the horizon, transforming the desert into a garden. The Atacama Desert in Chile and the Mojave Desert in the United States are famous for these super blooms. The flowers rush through their entire life cycle in just a few weeks, blooming, producing seeds and dying before the water disappears. It's nature's reminder that even in the harshest places, life is simply waiting for its moment. Certain birds can sleep with half their brain at a time. Some birds have evolved the remarkable ability to rest one hemisphere of their brain while keeping the other awake and alert. This is called unihemispheric slow-wave sleep, and it allows them to watch for predators or maintain flight while still getting rest. Ducks sleeping in a row will often keep one eye open, the eye connected to the wakeful half of the brain, watching for danger. Frigate birds can sleep while soaring over the ocean for weeks, their bodies gliding on air currents while their minds take turns resting. This adaptation shows how evolution can create solutions that seem almost impossible, splitting consciousness itself to meet the demands of survival. Some mountains are still growing taller each year. In places where tectonic plates collide, mountains continue to rise even today. The Himalayas grow about 5 millimeters per year as the Indian plate pushes into the Eurasian plate. Mount Everest, already the tallest peak on Earth, is still getting higher, though erosion from wind, ice, and gravity works to wear it down. Over human timescales, this growth is invisible, but over millions of years, it's the force that builds and reshapes entire continents. GPS measurements and satellite data now allow scientists to track these tiny changes with precision, watching the slow dance of the Earth's crust as it folds, buckles, and rises. There are plants that can survive for years without water. In the harshest deserts, some plants have evolved to endure droughts that would kill almost any other living thing. The resurrection plant, found in deserts of North America and Africa, can dry out completely, appearing dead and brittle. Its leaves curl into a tight ball, and it can stay in this dormant state for years. But when rain finally arrives, it absorbs water and unfurls within hours, turning green and resuming photosynthesis as if no time has passed. Other plants store water in thick, waxy leaves or deep roots that reach far underground to tap into hidden moisture. These adaptations allow life to persist in places where rain might not fall for months or even years at a time. Certain whales can hold their breath for over 2 hours. Deep-diving whales like the sperm whale and the beaked whale can descend to incredible depths, sometimes over 2,000 meters, and stay submerged for more than 2 hours. To accomplish this, they've evolved several remarkable adaptations. Their muscles contain high concentrations of myoglobin, a protein that stores oxygen. They can slow their heart rate dramatically, redirect blood flow to essential organs, and collapse their lungs to prevent nitrogen from entering their bloodstream. When they finally surface, blowing out a towering spout of mist and vapor, it's the culmination of a deep, dark journey into a world we can barely imagine, where pressure would crush most creatures and light has never reached. Some rivers run backwards during certain times of the year. In unusual circumstances, rivers can reverse their flow. The Chicago River was famously engineered to flow backward to protect the city's water supply, but natural reversals happen too. During extreme floods or storm surges, the mouth of a river can be overwhelmed by ocean water or backed up water from tributaries, forcing it to flow inland temporarily. The Tonle Sap River in Cambodia reverses naturally every year during a monsoon season, flowing backward for several months and swelling a massive lake before reversing again. These reversals create unique ecosystems and affect everything from fish migration to farming cycles. There are crystals that take millions of years to form, deep underground, in stable conditions of heat and pressure. Some crystals grow incredibly slowly, molecule by molecule, over unimaginable spans of time. The giant gypsum crystals found in the Cave of Crystals in Mexico, some reaching 11 meters long, took approximately 500,000 years to form. They grew in mineral-rich water kept at a constant warm temperature, adding layer upon layer in near-perfect conditions. When miners accidentally discovered the cave in 2000, they found a chamber filled with translucent beams larger than trees, glowing in the dim light. It's a place that feels frozen in time, the product of patience measured in geological ages. Some animals are older than the United States. Individual organisms can live for astonishing lengths of time. The oldest known living land animal is Jonathan, a Seychelles giant tortoise who's over 190 years old. He was alive when Queen Victoria was coronated and has lived through dozens of wars, technological revolutions, and the rise and fall of empires. In the ocean, Greenland sharks can live for over 400 years, making them the longest-lived vertebrates known. Some coral colonies and sponges may be thousands of years old, growing slowly and continuously in the same spot. These ancient individuals are living links to the past, having witnessed centuries of change while remaining essentially unchanged themselves. Certain trees can clone themselves to live forever. Some tree species reproduce by sending up new shoots from their root systems, creating groves of genetically identical trees. The Pando Aspen Grove in Utah is a single organism consisting of over 40,000 tree trunks, all connected underground. It's estimated to be thousands of years old and weighs over 6,000 tons, making it one of the heaviest and oldest living organisms on Earth. Individual trunks may die, but new ones continuously emerge, allowing the organism as a whole to persist indefinitely. In this way, the tree has found a kind of immortality, regenerating itself season after season, century after century. There are waterfalls that flow upward when winds are strong. On coastal cliffs and in mountainous regions, powerful updrafts can catch falling water and push it back up into the air. This creates the surreal sight of water appearing to defy gravity, streaming upward instead of down. The effect is most dramatic at tall waterfalls near the ocean, where sea winds are funneled upward by the cliff face. In places like the Faroe Islands and coastal Scotland, these reversed waterfalls are a regular occurrence during storms. The water is essentially turned to mist and carried away by the wind, disappearing into the air before it can reach the bottom. Some flowers emit heat to attract pollinators. Certain plants in the arum family, including the corpse flower and skunk cabbage, can generate their own heat through a process called thermogenesis. By rapidly metabolizing stored energy, they can raise their temperature well above the surrounding air, sometimes by 15 degrees Celsius or more. This heat helps volatilize scent compounds, spreading their odor farther to attract pollinators. It also makes the flower more comfortable for insects, which will often spend the night inside, basking in the warmth. For plants blooming in early spring or cool climates, this ability provides a crucial advantage, making them irresistible to the few pollinators that are active. There are islands that appear and disappear with the tides. In coastal areas with extreme tidal ranges, entire islands can be submerged at high tide and revealed at low tide. These tidal islands are connected to the mainland by sandbars or rocky causeways that only emerge when the water recedes. Mont Saint-Michel in France is perhaps the most famous example. A medieval abbey perched on rock that becomes an island surrounded by sea at high tide. Twice a day, the relationship between land and water shifts, transforming the landscape. For those caught unaware, the returning tide can be dangerous, cutting off escape routes and turning solid ground back into sea within hours. Certain insects can survive being submerged in liquid for extended periods. Some insects have evolved the ability to breathe underwater or enter a state of suspended animation when submerged. The larvae of certain flies can create a bubble of air around their bodies using hydrophobic hairs, effectively carrying their own atmosphere with them. Other insects slow their metabolism so dramatically that they require almost no oxygen, allowing them to survive underwater for days or even weeks. This adaptation is particularly useful for species that live near water or in flood-prone areas, giving them a way to endure temporary inundation without drowning. Some caves contain formations that look like frozen waterfalls. In limestone caves, mineral deposits can create stunning formations called flowstone, which cascade down walls and over ledges like frozen rivers of stone. These form when calcium carbonate-rich water flows over surfaces, leaving behind thin layers of minerals that gradually build up over thousands of years. The result can look like curtains, draperies, or waterfalls of rock, often colored by traces of iron, copper, or other minerals. In the dim light of a cave, these formations can appear otherworldly, as if water had suddenly turned to stone mid-flow, preserved forever in a moment of stillness. There are animals that never drink water their entire lives. Some desert-dwelling animals have evolved to meet all their water needs from the food they eat, never drinking water directly. The kangaroo rat of North American deserts gets all its moisture from seeds and can survive its entire life without a single drop of water. Its kidneys are so efficient that it produces extremely concentrated urine, losing almost no water in the process. Similarly, some desert lizards and insects obtain water through metabolic processes or by extracting moisture from their food, allowing them to thrive in environments where standing water is almost never available. Certain clouds can travel thousands of miles. Some clouds, particularly those formed during major volcanic eruptions or large dust storms, can circle the globe. Volcanic ash clouds can be carried by high-altitude winds around the entire planet, affecting sunsets and weather patterns far from the eruption site. The ash from Mount Pinatubo's 1991 eruption traveled worldwide, temporarily cooling global temperatures. Dust from the Sahara Desert is regularly carried across the Atlantic Ocean to South America and the Caribbean, sometimes creating hazy skies as far as Texas. These traveling clouds show how interconnected Earth's atmosphere is with events in one place, affecting conditions thousands of miles away. Some animals can regrow their entire bodies from small fragments. Planarian flatworms have such remarkable regenerative abilities that if you cut one into dozens of pieces, each piece can potentially grow into a complete new worm. Starfish can regenerate from a single arm if part of the central disc is still attached. Some species of jellyfish can regenerate after severe injury, reforming their bell-shaped bodies from scattered tissue. This ability comes from populations of stem cells that can differentiate into any type of cell the organism needs. It's a form of healing that borders on resurrection, allowing these creatures to recover from damage that would be fatal to most animals. There are places where lightning strikes thousands of times per hour. Lake Maracaibo in Venezuela experiences more lightning than anywhere else on Earth. for up to 160 nights per year. Spectacular electrical storms rage for up to 10 hours at a time, with lightning flashing up to 280 times per hour. This phenomenon, known as the Catatumbo lightning, occurs where the lake meets mountains, and warm, moist air collides with cold winds. The result is a near constant display of thunder and lightning, visible for miles around. Local people have used it for navigation for centuries, and it has become such a defining feature of the region that it appears on the state flag. Some plants can count to 5. The Venus flytrap doesn't snap shut randomly. It counts. When an insect touches one of the trigger hairs inside the trap, the plant registers it. If nothing else happens, it ignores the signal in case it was just a falling leaf or a drop of rain. But if a second touch occurs within about 20 seconds, the trap closes. Some research suggests the plant continues counting touches even after closing, using the number of subsequent triggers to determine how much digestive enzyme to produce. This counting ability shows a level of information processing that challenges our assumptions about plant intelligence. There are mountains in the ocean taller than any on land. If you measure from base to peak, Mauna Kea in Hawaii is taller than Mount Everest. Most of Mauna Kea is underwater, but from its base on the ocean floor to its summit, it rises over 10,000 meters, compared to Everest's 8,149 meters above sea level. These submarine mountains, called seamounts, are common throughout the oceans. Many are ancient volcanoes that grew from the seafloor but never quite reached the surface. They create unique ecosystems, with different marine life at various depths, and can influence ocean currents and weather patterns. Certain birds make tools to hunt. New Caledonian crows are among the most intelligent tool users in the animal kingdom. They fashion hooks from twigs and use them to extract insects from tree bark. They can modify tools to make them more effective, choosing the right size and shape for different tasks. Even more remarkably, they can solve multi-step puzzles, using one tool to retrieve another tool that they then use to access food. This level of problem-solving was once thought to be unique to primates, but these birds demonstrate that intelligence and ingenuity can evolve independently in very different forms of life. Some deserts are covered in flowers that bloom in perfect synchrony. In certain desert regions, wildflowers have evolved to germinate and bloom in near-perfect unison after rain. This synchronized flowering happens because the seeds respond to the same environmental cues, temperature, moisture, and day length, and because blooming together maximizes pollination success. When millions of flowers open at once, they create a brief but intense burst of color and activity that attracts every available pollinator in the region. The strategy is risky, betting everything on a short window of opportunity. But when it works, it ensures the next generation is sown across the landscape. There are pools of water under the ocean that fish can't swim through. In some parts of the seafloor, dense, super salty water collects in depressions, forming underwater lakes and rivers. These hypersaline pools are so much denser than the surrounding seawater that they have distinct surfaces, complete with shores and even waves. Marine life can't survive in them due to the extreme salinity and often toxic chemicals. Fish that accidentally swim into these pools die quickly, their bodies preserved in the salty water. Submarines exploring these underwater lakes have described the eerie experience of breaking through a surface far beneath the ocean's surface, entering a lake within the sea. Certain trees can live with their centers completely hollowed out. Some of the world's oldest and largest trees are hollow, their heartwood long since decayed or burned away. Yet they continue to grow, adding new layers of living wood around the outside. The sapwood just beneath the bark is what transports water and nutrients, so as long as this outer layer remains intact, the tree can thrive even with a hollow core. Some ancient baobabs and giant sequoias are hollow enough that people can walk inside them, standing within a living tree that may be thousands of years old. It's a reminder that life often persists not through perfection, but through adaptation and resilience. Some animals can see more colors than the rainbow. While humans see 3 primary colors, some animals have far more complex color vision. Mantis shrimp have 16 types of color receptors in their eyes, compared to our 3, allowing them to perceive a spectrum of colors we can't even imagine. They can see ultraviolet, infrared, and polarized light. This extraordinary vision helps them hunt, communicate, and navigate their colorful coral reef homes. To them, the ocean must look painted in dimensions of color that have no names in human language, a visual world far richer than anything we can perceive. There are plants that move their leaves to track the sun across the sky. Many plants exhibit a behavior called heliotropism, turning their leaves or flowers to follow the sun as it moves from east to west during the day. Sunflowers are the most famous example, with young flowers tracking the sun throughout the day and facing east by morning to greet the dawn. This movement is controlled by growth patterns on different sides of the stem, with the shaded side growing slightly faster to turn the plant toward the light. At night, the process reverses, repositioning the flower for the next day's sunrise. It's a slow but deliberate motion, a plant reaching toward its source of energy with patient persistence. Certain fish can walk on land and breathe air. Mud skippers are fish that spend much of their time out of water, using modified fins to walk or hop across mud flats. They can breathe through their skin and the lining of their mouths and throats, as long as they stay moist. Some can even climb trees using their pectoral fins as grips. These adaptations allow them to exploit a niche that other fish can't reach, feeding on insects and crabs in the intertidal zone. Watching a mud skipper pull itself across the ground, its bulging eyes scanning for food, feels like witnessing a bridge between aquatic and terrestrial life. Some clouds are so massive they create their own weather systems. The largest thunderstorm clouds, called supercells, can be 15 kilometers tall and contain millions of tons of water. They rotate slowly as they move across the landscape, creating their own wind patterns and sometimes spawning tornadoes. Inside these towering structures, powerful updrafts and downdrafts circulate air at incredible speeds, with some winds exceeding 150 kilometers per hour. Lightning flashes constantly within the cloud, and hail forms in the turbulent upper reaches before falling. These storms are weather systems unto themselves, mini atmospheres with their own internal climate. There are forests that grew on the graves of ancient seas. Many of today's coal deposits and oil reserves come from forests and marine organisms that died millions of years ago. When sea levels were different, vast swamps and shallow seas covered areas that are now dry land. The plants and animals that lived there were buried under sediment, and over millions of years, heat and pressure transformed them into coal, oil, and natural gas. Walking through a forest today, it's strange to think that someday millions of years from now, these same trees might become the fossil fuels of a distant future. Certain animals can survive radiation that would kill humans instantly. Tardigrades, microscopic animals also called water bears, can survive radiation levels thousands of times higher than what would kill a person. They do this by producing proteins that shield their DNA from damage and rapidly repairing any damage that does occur. Other extremophiles, like the bacterium Deinococcus radiodurans, can withstand radiation exposure by maintaining multiple copies of their genome and having exceptionally efficient DNA repair mechanisms. These abilities have made them subjects of intense study, both for understanding life's limits and for potential applications in medicine and space exploration. Some islands are entirely made of bird droppings. Over thousands of years, seabird colonies can deposit enough guano to create entire islands. These phosphate-rich islands, found in tropical and subtropical waters, were once valuable for fertilizer production. The accumulation is slow but steady, with generations of birds returning to the same nesting sites year after year, adding layer upon layer of droppings that eventually compact and mineralize into rock. Some of these islands can be dozens of meters tall, testimony to the sheer numbers of birds and the immense spans of time over which they've gathered. There are animals that can change the texture of their skin in seconds. Octopuses are masters of disguise, able to change not just their color, but also the texture of their skin to match their surroundings. They do this using specialized cells called chromatophores for color and papillae, small muscle-controlled bumps that can make their skin smooth or rough. An octopus on a rocky reef can transform itself to look like coral, complete with bumpy protrusions. On sand, it smooths out and matches the color and grain of the bottom. These transformations happen in less than a second, making the octopus nearly invisible to both prey and predators. Certain rivers never reach the ocean. In dry regions, some rivers flow inland and eventually disappear, either sinking into the ground or evaporating in the heat. The Okavango River in southern Africa flows into the Kalahari Desert, where it spreads out into a vast inland delta, creating a lush wetland that never drains to the sea. The water seeps into the sand or evaporates, leaving behind dissolved minerals. These endorheic rivers create unique ecosystems, supporting wildlife in the middle of otherwise inhospitable landscapes. They're reminders that not all water follows the expected path back to the ocean. Some plants can predict the weather. Certain plants respond to changes in atmospheric pressure and humidity that precede rain. The scarlet pimpernel, sometimes called the poor man's weatherglass, closes its flowers when rain is approaching. Pine cones open in dry weather and close when moisture is in the air. While not perfectly accurate, these responses are based on real environmental changes, giving plants a way to protect their pollen or prepare for incoming water. Observant gardeners have long used these plant behaviors as natural forecasting tools. There are waterfalls that freeze in midair. In extreme cold, waterfalls can freeze while still flowing, creating spectacular ice formations. The water continues to move beneath and within the ice, but the surface freezes into curtains, columns, and frozen spray. In places like Norway, Iceland, and parts of North America, frozen waterfalls become destinations for ice climbers who scale the blue ice formations. The sound of water moving beneath the ice gives these frozen falls an eerie quality, as if time itself has been partially stopped. catching the water between motion and stillness. Certain corals can reproduce by releasing millions of eggs simultaneously. On specific nights each year, coral reefs participate in a massive synchronized spawning event. Triggered by water temperature, moon phase, and time of night, thousands of coral polyps release eggs and sperm into the water at the same moment. The water becomes thick with a blizzard of tiny pink and white bundles drifting upward. This synchronization increases the chances of fertilization and overwhelms predators with sheer abundance. For divers lucky enough to witness it, the event is mesmerizing, like watching an underwater snowstorm in reverse. Some animals create art with no apparent survival purpose. Bowerbirds build elaborate structures and decorate them with colorful objects purely to attract mates. The more beautiful and well-maintained the bower, the more likely the male is to successfully reproduce. But the criteria for beauty seem to go beyond simple function. Males arrange objects by color, size, and even create optical illusions by placing larger objects farther from the bower's entrance to make the structure appear more uniform. This suggests an aesthetic sense, an appreciation for visual harmony that mirrors artistic principles found in human cultures. There are underground rivers that have never been mapped. Beneath the surface in karst landscapes, extensive river systems flow through networks of caves and passages. Some have been explored for miles, but many branches remain unmapped and unknown. These rivers can be vast, carrying as much water as surface rivers, yet flowing in complete darkness. They eventually emerge as springs, sometimes far from where they disappeared underground. Cave divers and explorers continue to discover new sections, mapping the hidden hydrology that shapes landscapes from below. Certain seeds need to be eaten to germinate. Some plants have evolved seeds with hard shells that can only be broken down by passing through an animal's digestive system. The stomach acids and mechanical grinding soften the shell, allowing the seed to germinate after being deposited in a new location with a dose of fertilizer. This mutualistic relationship benefits both plant and animal. The plant's seeds are dispersed away from the parent plant, reducing competition, and the animal gets a nutritious meal. Avocados, tomatoes, and many berries rely on this strategy, their seeds designed to survive digestion and thrive afterward. Some mountains are volcanoes that have never erupted. Not all volcanoes are explosive. Some form from slow, steady upwellings of magma that never quite break through to the surface. These dormant or extinct volcanoes can become mountains that show few signs of their volcanic origins. Others have erupted in the distant past, but have been inactive for so long that erosion has changed their shape entirely. Geologists study these sleeping giants carefully, knowing that dormant doesn't necessarily mean dead, and that volcanic activity can resume even after thousands of years of silence. There are animals that can freeze solid and survive. Some frogs, particularly the wood frog, can survive winter by allowing up to 70% of their body water to freeze solid. Their hearts stop beating, their blood stops flowing, and they appear completely dead. But specialized proteins and high concentrations of glucose in their cells prevent ice crystals from damaging cell structures. When spring arrives and temperatures rise, they thaw out and hop away, apparently none the worse for their ordeal. It's a survival strategy that seems impossible, yet it's been perfected through millions of years of evolution. Certain trees drop all their leaves at once in response to stress. While deciduous trees normally lose leaves gradually in autumn, some trees in response to drought, disease, or insect attack will drop their entire canopy at once. This emergency response helps the tree conserve water and redirect energy to survival, rather than maintaining leaves that have become a liability. The sudden leaf drop can turn a green forest brown in a matter of days. Once conditions improve, the tree may produce a new set of leaves, essentially getting a fresh start within the same growing season. Some caves contain perfectly preserved Ice Age remains. In the cold, stable environments of certain caves, the remains of animals from the last Ice Age have been preserved for tens of thousands of years. Cave bears, saber-toothed cats, and woolly mammoths have been found in such remarkable condition that their fur, skin, and even stomach contents remain intact. The constant cold and lack of scavengers keep these remains frozen in time. In some cases, scientists have been able to extract DNA and study the genetics of species that went extinct long before recorded history. These caves are like natural museums, holding snapshots of a world that vanished when the ice retreated. There are plants that can pull nutrients from the air. While most plants draw nutrients from soil, some have learned to harvest them from the atmosphere. Air plants, or tillandsia, have no functional roots and instead absorb water and nutrients through specialized scales on their leaves. They capture moisture from fog, dew, and rain, along with the dust particles and dissolved minerals. Spanish moss drapes from trees in the southeastern United States, surviving entirely on what it can catch from the air. These plants show that life can adapt to find resources in unexpected places, turning the atmosphere itself into a source of sustenance. Certain fish can recognize human faces. Research has shown that archerfish, which hunt by shooting jets of water at insects above the surface, can learn to distinguish between different human faces shown to them on screens. Despite having a brain structure completely different from mammals and never having evolved alongside humans, they can pick out a specific face from a lineup with surprising accuracy. This challenges assumptions about what kinds of intelligence are needed for facial recognition and suggests that problem-solving abilities can evolve in many different forms across the animal kingdom. Some islands are inhabited by animals found nowhere else on Earth. Isolated islands often become laboratories of evolution. The Galapagos Islands housefinches, tortoises, and iguanas found nowhere else. Madagascar's lemurs evolved in isolation for millions of years. On smaller, more remote islands, evolution can take dramatic turns. The Komodo dragon exists only on a handful of Indonesian islands. New Zealand was once home to the moa, a giant, flightless bird, and still hosts the tuatara, a reptile that has barely changed in 200 million years. These island species show how geography shapes life, creating unique creatures when populations are separated from the mainland. There are rivers that change colors with the seasons. Some rivers shift through a spectrum of colors depending on minerals, algae, and sediment. The Caño Cristalis in Colombia is called the River of Five Colors because aquatic plants turn sections of it red, yellow, green, blue, and black at certain times of year. The timing depends on water levels and sunlight, creating a brief window when the river becomes a flowing rainbow. In other locations, glacial melt turns rivers milky turquoise with rock flour, while tannins from decaying vegetation can turn water tea-colored or even black. Each color tells a story about what the river has passed through on its journey. Certain animals never sleep in the conventional sense. Some species have found ways to rest without ever fully sleeping. Dolphins and whales, use unihemispheric sleep, resting half their brain while the other half stays alert. But some sharks must keep swimming to breathe, and they may rest by reducing activity in parts of their brain while still moving forward. Bullfrogs appear to rest, but may not experience true sleep in the way mammals do. These animals remind us that sleep, which seems so universal, is actually just one strategy for rest, and that life has invented many different ways to recover and conserve energy. Some clouds form in completely clear skies. Lenticular clouds can appear on otherwise cloudless days, forming in the lee of mountains where air flows in smooth, wave-like patterns. These lens-shaped clouds hover in place, seemingly motionless even as wind rushes through them. They maintain their shape because they're constantly forming on the upwind side and evaporating on the downwind side. To observers unfamiliar with them, lenticular clouds can look like flying saucers, and they've been mistaken for UFOs countless times. In reality, they're simply visible manifestations of invisible air waves in the atmosphere. There are trees that can warn their neighbors through underground fungal networks. Beneath the forest floor, fungi form vast networks called mycorrhizae that connect tree roots. Through these networks, trees can share not just nutrients, but also warning signals. When a tree is attacked by insects, it can send chemical signals through the fungal network to neighboring trees, prompting them to increase their production of defensive compounds. This underground internet allows forests to function as interconnected communities rather than collections of individuals, with older trees sometimes supporting younger ones by sharing resources through the network. Certain deserts have trees older than the pyramids. Bristlecone pines in the high deserts of the American Southwest can live for over 5,000 years. These gnarled, twisted trees grow in such harsh conditions that they add only a fraction of a millimeter to their trunks each year. Their wood becomes incredibly dense, resistant to rot, insects, and disease. Some living bristlecones began growing when humans were just inventing writing. They've stood through the entire span of recorded history, silently witnessing the rise and fall of civilizations while adding one ring at a time to their ancient trunks. Some animals can hibernate for more than half the year. Arctic ground squirrels in Alaska hibernate for up to 8 months, during which their body temperature drops below freezing, the only known mammal that can survive with sub-zero body temperatures. During this time, their metabolism slows to a fraction of normal, and they neither eat nor drink. They emerge briefly to rewarm every few weeks, a process that's still not fully understood by scientists. This extreme hibernation allows them to survive in environments where winter is so long and harsh that staying active would be impossible. There are flowers that only bloom at night. Night, blooming flowers like the queen of the night cactus, and certain species of jasmine open their petals only after dark. These flowers are often white or pale colored, making them visible in moonlight, and they release powerful fragrances to attract nocturnal pollinators like moths and bats. Some bloom for only a single night before wilting, making the event rare and special. The heavy, sweet scent of night blooming flowers on a warm evening is one of nature's most intoxicating experiences, a reminder that much of the natural world's activity happens while we sleep. Certain birds can navigate using the stars. Many migratory birds, particularly those that travel at night, use the stars to find their way. Indigo buntings and other species can identify the patterns of constellations and use them as a compass. Young birds learn the rotation of the night sky, identifying which stars stay relatively fixed and using them as reference points. Even birds raised in captivity without ever seeing the real night sky can orient themselves using planetarium projections, showing that this ability is partly instinctive, but also requires learning. Some mountains are made of pure iron. While most mountains are composed of rock, formed from silicon-based minerals, there are places where massive iron deposits have been pushed to the surface. The Iron Mountain in Missouri and similar formations around the world are essentially solid iron ore, so rich in metal that they affect compass readings in the surrounding area. These deposits formed billions of years ago when Earth's atmosphere had little oxygen, allowing iron to concentrate in sediments on the ocean floor. When tectonic forces pushed these ancient seabeds upward, they created mountains made almost entirely of metal. There are lakes at the bottom of the ocean with their own unique ecosystems. Brine pools on the ocean floor are so salty and dense that they form distinct bodies of water beneath the sea. These underwater lakes have shorelines, waves, and are deadly to most marine life. But around their edges, unique ecosystems thrive. Specialized mussels and tube worms gather at the boundaries, feeding on bacteria that derive energy from the chemicals seeping from the seafloor. These oases of life in the deep ocean show that even in Earth's most extreme environments, where conditions seem incompatible with life, evolution finds a way. Certain insects can walk on water without breaking the surface. Water striders have legs covered in thousands of microscopic hairs that trap air and repel water. This, combined with their light weight and the surface tension of water, allows them to literally stand on the surface without sinking. They can skate across ponds and streams at impressive speeds, using their middle legs like oars. The tiny dimples they make in the water's surface are visible from below, where fish sometimes watch these unlikely water walkers moving across the boundary between two worlds. Some rocks are older than the solar system. Meteorites that fall to Earth sometimes contain mineral grains called pre-solar grains that formed before our sun existed. These tiny crystals, smaller than a human hair, condensed in the outer layers of dying stars billions of years ago. They drifted through space, eventually being incorporated into the cloud of dust and gas that became our solar system. By studying these grains, scientists can learn about the stars that existed before the sun, making them windows into a time before Earth, before the planets, before even the star we orbit. There are animals that can see polarized light. While humans see only the brightness and color of light, many animals can also detect its polarization, the direction the light waves are oscillating. Bees use polarized light patterns in the sky to navigate even on cloudy days. Octopuses and squid may use it to communicate with patterns invisible to predators. Some birds use polarization as an additional compass sense. This hidden dimension of light creates a layer of visual information that we're completely blind to, but that many creatures rely on every day. Certain trees can survive being struck by lightning repeatedly. Some large, isolated trees are struck by lightning dozens or even hundreds of times over their lifetimes. Surprisingly, many survive these strikes. The electricity travels down the outside of the trunk, often vaporizing a strip of bark but leaving the living wood beneath largely undamaged. The tree's moisture content creates a path of least resistance for the current. Over time, a tree may accumulate multiple lightning scars, visible as long vertical grooves in the bark, badges of survival from one of nature's most powerful forces. Some deserts are actually cold year-round. The largest deserts on Earth aren't hot and sandy, but cold and icy. Antarctica is technically a desert because it receives so little precipitation. Parts of the Arctic are similarly dry. These polar deserts experience extreme cold, powerful winds, and months of darkness. Yet life persists there. Lichens grow on exposed rocks, seals and penguins inhabit the coastal areas, and in Antarctica, microbes live in the dry valleys, some of the most Mars-like environments on Earth. These frozen deserts remind us that desert is defined by dryness, not temperature. There are plants that can count days to know when to flower. Many plants use an internal mechanism called photoperiodism to measure the length of days and nights. They don't just respond to a certain amount of light. They actually count how many short days or long nights they've experienced. This allows them to time their flowering precisely with the seasons, ensuring they bloom when pollinators are available and conditions are right for seed development. This internal calendar is so precise that gardeners can predict bloom times with remarkable accuracy, and scientists can manipulate it by controlling light exposure. Certain clouds can last for hundreds of miles. Banner clouds form on the lee side of mountain peaks when wind flows over and around the summit. These clouds can stretch for incredible distances downwind, sometimes remaining attached to the same mountain for hours or days. The Matterhorn in Switzerland is famous for its banner cloud, which streams from the peak like a flag even on otherwise clear days. The cloud forms continuously where moist air rising up one side of the mountain suddenly decompresses and cools as it passes over the summit. Some animals can produce light without heat. Bioluminescence is a cold light, produced through chemical reactions rather than heat. Fireflies, glowworms, and many marine organisms create light with almost 100% efficiency, wasting virtually no energy as heat. This is far more efficient than any light bulb humans have created. The light is produced when a molecule called luciferin reacts with oxygen in the presence of an enzyme. Different species produce different colors, from the blue-green of dinoflagellates to the yellow-green of fireflies, painting the night with living light. There are fish that can climb waterfalls. Some fish have evolved remarkable abilities to travel upstream over obstacles that would seem impassable. Certain gobies in Hawaiian streams use suction cup-like fins to inch their way up sheer rock faces beside waterfalls. Salmon leap up cascades, sometimes repeatedly hurling themselves at the falling water until they succeed. These migrations are driven by the need to reach spawning grounds, and the fish expend tremendous energy in the process. Their determination and physical prowess are extraordinary, allowing them to overcome obstacles that defy their fundamental nature as aquatic creatures. Certain forests are so dense that rain never reaches the ground. In the thickest rainforests, the canopy is so layered and lush that rain is intercepted by leaves high above. The water drips from leaf to leaf, evaporates, or is absorbed by epiphytes, plants that grow on tree branches. By the time moisture reaches the forest floor, it's more mist than rain. This canopy interception can account for a large percentage of rainfall in tropical forests, with some water never reaching the ground at all, but instead being taken up by plants at various levels or returning to the atmosphere through evaporation. Some animals can change sex multiple times. Unlike species that change sex once, some fish can switch back and forth multiple times throughout their lives. Certain gobies and coral reef fish will change sex in response to social dynamics. If the dominant male dies, the largest female may become male. If the ratio of males to females becomes skewed, some individuals may switch to balance the population. This flexibility ensures that reproduction can continue regardless of what happens to other members of the group, a fluid approach to sex that prioritizes the survival of the population over the individual. There are plants that can photosynthesize without chlorophyll. Most plants are green because of chlorophyll, the pigment that captures sunlight for photosynthesis. But some parasitic plants have lost their chlorophyll entirely and instead tap into other plants' roots to steal nutrients and sugars. The ghost plant, or Indian pipe, is pure white, growing on the forest floor and deriving all its energy from fungi that connect it to nearby trees. Without needing to make its own food, it has no use for chlorophyll, and its pale, translucent appearance makes it look more like a mushroom than a flowering plant. Certain rivers carry so much sediment they look like chocolate milk. The Amazon, Ganges, and Yellow rivers carry enormous loads of suspended sediment, giving them opaque, muddy appearances. The Yellow River in China gets its name from the yellow-brown color of the silt it carries, sediment eroded from the Loess Plateau. This sediment isn't just dirt. It's mineral-rich material that fertilizes floodplains and deltas, creating some of the world's most productive agricultural land. The muddiest rivers are rivers of life, carrying nutrients that sustain millions of people downstream. Some caves contain pools that are perfectly still. In deep caves isolated from wind and vibration, pools of water can become so still that their surfaces act like perfect mirrors. Cave explorers describe the disorienting experience of looking into these pools and being unable to tell where the water surface is, seeing a perfect reflection of the ceiling that merges seamlessly with the real cave above. These pools can remain undisturbed for years, accumulating delicate mineral formations at their edges and preserving a stillness found almost nowhere else on Earth. There are animals that can survive without a brain. Jellyfish have no brains, yet they can swim, eat, reproduce, and respond to their environment. They have a distributed nervous system, a network of nerves that coordinates their movements without central processing. Sea sponges don't even have nervous systems, yet they're living animals that filter water, reproduce, and have been successful for over 500 million years. These creatures show that brains, which seem so essential to animal life, are actually optional, and that life can be successful with much simpler organizational systems. Certain birds have been observed mourning their dead. Crows, ravens, and jays have been seen gathering around deceased members of their species, calling loudly and behaving in ways that suggest grief or distress. Elephants are famous for touching and examining the bones of dead elephants, sometimes covering them with branches. Whether these behaviors represent true mourning, an understanding of death, or simply confusion at the stillness of a formerly living being is debated, but they hint at emotional complexity and social bonds that extend even beyond life. Some mountains create their own weather patterns. Large mountains can force air upward, causing it to cool and release moisture. This creates a rain shadow effect, where one side of the mountain is lush and wet, while the other is dry. The Himalayas create distinct climate zones, with the southern slopes receiving heavy monsoon rains, while the northern side remains arid. Mountains can also generate local wind patterns, cloud formations, and temperature inversions, essentially creating microclimates that can be dramatically different from the surrounding lowlands just a few kilometers away. There are insects that can survive in petroleum. Some fly larvae have been found living in the pools of crude oil, feeding on other insects that become trapped in the viscous liquid. These larvae have evolved to tolerate the toxic chemicals that would kill most organisms, breathing through specialized tubes that reach above the oil's surface. It's a niche so extreme that few other creatures can exploit it, and these flies face almost no competition for the food source. Life, it seems, will find a way into even the most hostile environments if there's energy to be extracted. Certain plants can live for centuries without ever touching soil. Some air plants in tropical forests spend their entire lives growing on the branches of trees, never sending roots to the ground. They capture all the water and nutrients they need from rain, fog, and dust that settles on their leaves. Orchids, bromeliads, and ferns can grow this way, creating entire hanging gardens in the forest canopy. These epiphytes don't harm their host trees. They simply use them as platforms to reach the sunlight that's scarce on the shaded forest floor. Some rivers freeze from the bottom up. In extremely cold conditions with certain water compositions, rivers can develop anchor ice that forms on the riverbed and rocks rather than at the surface. This happens when the water is supercooled, remaining liquid below freezing point until it touches a solid surface. As anchor ice accumulates, it can eventually float to the surface in large sheets, sometimes carrying rocks and debris with it. The phenomenon creates surreal ice sculptures along the riverbed and can dramatically alter the flow of water through a frozen landscape. There are animals that can regenerate their eyes. Some salamanders and certain fish can regrow eyes after injury, not just repairing damage, but regrowing entire complex structures, including the lens, retina, and optic nerve. This ability comes from populations of stem cells that can differentiate into any type of tissue needed. Researchers study these animals to understand how such complete regeneration is possible, hoping to someday apply those principles to human medicine. For now, it remains one of nature's most impressive healing abilities. Certain clouds can generate earthquakes. Large volcanic eruptions produce ash clouds so dense that the particles collide and generate static, electricity, creating lightning within the cloud. But the sheer weight and density of these ash clouds can also trigger small earthquakes as they interact with the ground. More commonly, the eruption itself causes seismic activity that's amplified by the massive cloud above. These volcanic lightning storms with thunder, tremors, and falling ash are some of the most dramatic and dangerous natural phenomena on Earth. Some lakes turn blood red under specific conditions. When certain species of algae bloom, in response to warm temperatures and high nutrient levels, they can turn water a deep blood red. The red tide phenomenon occurs in oceans and lakes worldwide. And while some of these algae are harmless, others produce toxins that can kill fish and make shellfish dangerous to eat. The sight of an entire lake or bay turning crimson can be unsettling, a natural event that looks more like a biblical plague than a normal part of ecosystem dynamics. There are places where plants grow on pure rock. In newly formed volcanic landscapes, pioneer species begin the slow process of turning bare rock into soil. Lichens are often first, organisms that are actually symbiotic partnerships between fungi and algae. They secrete acids that slowly dissolve rock, and when they die, their remains add organic matter. Over decades or centuries, enough material accumulates for mosses, and then small plants, then eventually trees. This primary succession transforms lifeless stone into living landscape. a process that can take thousands of years, but inevitably turns even the most barren rock into fertile ground. Certain animals can detect diseases in humans. Dogs have been trained to detect cancer, diabetes, and seizures by smell, but some appear to do it naturally without training. Stories abound of dogs persistently sniffing or pawing at specific areas of their owners' bodies where tumors were later found. While not all dogs have this ability, those that do can detect chemical changes associated with disease through their extraordinarily sensitive noses. Research is ongoing into training dogs and even developing artificial noses that could screen for diseases through scent alone. Some glaciers have rivers flowing on their surfaces. During summer, meltwater on the surface of glaciers can form streams that flow across the ice. Some of these streams drop into moulins, vertical shafts that plunge deep into the glacier, carrying water to the base where it lubricates the glacier's movement over bedrock. Walking on a glacier and hearing the rush of water beneath your feet is disconcerting, a reminder that even massive ice sheets are dynamic, flowing, melting, and constantly reshaping themselves in response to temperature and pressure. There are trees that can communicate chemical distress signals. When attacked by insects, some trees release ethylene and other volatile compounds that serve as distress signals. Neighboring trees that detect these chemicals begin producing tannins and other defensive compounds, making themselves less appetizing before they're attacked. Some of these signals can travel through the air for significant distances, creating a wave of preparation through the forest. It's a form of communication that happens in slow motion from a human perspective. But in the world of trees, it's a rapid response system that can mean the difference between survival and defoliation. Certain deserts have lakes that come and go with the years. In some arid regions, extremely flat basins fill with water during wet years, creating temporary lakes that can be huge but shallow. These playas can cover hundreds of square kilometers during floods, attracting millions of birds and creating brief aquatic ecosystems. Then, as the water evaporates, they return to dry lake beds, sometimes so flat and white with salt that they're used as racetracks and testing grounds. The transition from lake to desert and back can happen multiple times within a human lifetime. Some animals can see heat. Pit vipers, pythons, and boas have specialized organs that detect infrared radiation, essentially allowing them to see heat. This sense creates a thermal image of their surroundings, showing them the warm bodies of prey even in complete darkness. The resolution isn't as fine as visual sight, but it's accurate enough to strike a mouse in the dark with perfect precision. This thermal vision opens up a night hunting niche that gives these snakes a significant advantage over prey that rely only on conventional senses. There are caves with formations that ring like bells. In some caves, thin sheets of flowstone called draperies hang from the ceiling, and when tapped gently, they produce musical notes. The pitch depends on the thickness and length of the formation, and different formations produce different tones. Some caves have entire organ pipes of these draperies that can be played like an instrument. Historically, some caves were even used as natural concert halls, with the formations creating haunting, ethereal music that resonates through the stone chambers. Certain flowers can heat themselves like warm-blooded animals. The skunk cabbage can raise its temperature to 15 to 35 degrees Celsius above the surrounding air, even maintaining this warmth for days or weeks. This heat generation allows it to melt through snow in early spring and also helps spread its pungent scent to to attract pollinators. The sacred lotus does something similar, regulating its temperature to provide a warm haven for beetles that pollinated. These thermogenic plants blur the line between plant and animal, using metabolic heat generation that was once thought to be exclusively an animal trait. Some mountains are actually the stumps of ancient supervolcanoes. Devil's Tower in Wyoming and similar formations are remnants of volcanic activity from millions of years ago. The softer rock around ancient volcanic pipes eroded away, leaving behind the harder igneous rock that once filled the volcano's throat. These formations stand as monuments to explosive events in Earth's distant past, and geologists study them to understand volcanic processes and the landscapes they create. What looks like a solid tower of stone is actually a window into the subterranean plumbing of ancient fire mountains. There are animals that can photosynthesize. The spotted salamander has a unique relationship with algae that live inside its cells. The algae photosynthesize, producing oxygen and sugars that the salamander can use, while the salamander provides carbon dioxide and nitrogen waste that the algae need. This makes the spotted salamander the only known vertebrate that can derive energy from photosynthesis, even if indirectly. The algae are passed from parent to offspring in the egg, maintaining the partnership across generations in a collaboration between animal and plant that's unlike anything else in the vertebrate world. Certain rivers run through caves for miles before emerging. The Puerto Princesa Underground River in the Philippines flows through a cave system for over 8 kilometers before emptying into the sea. Boat tours can take visitors partway into the darkness, where the cave ceiling rises to cathedral proportions and formations glitter in flashlight beams. The river continues far beyond where tourists can go, winding through chambers that have never been fully explored. These underground waterways carve out vast spaces in limestone, creating some of Earth's largest cave systems over millions of years of patient erosion. Some clouds produce snow that never reaches the ground. In dry air, falling snow can sublimate, turning directly from ice to water vapor before it hits the surface. This creates virga, visible streaks falling from clouds that seem to disappear in midair. The effect is common in arid regions, where low humidity evaporates precipitation before it can complete its journey. From below, it looks like rain or snow that simply vanishes, dissolving into nothing as it falls. A reminder that not all precipitation actually precipitates. There are plants that can clone entire forests. Aspen trees spread through root systems, sending up new trunks that are genetically identical to the parent. What looks like a forest of individual trees may actually be a single organism spread across many acres. The Pando Grove in Utah is estimated to be 80,000 years old and weighs around 6 million kilograms, making it potentially the oldest and heaviest living organism on Earth. Individual trunks live for only 100 to 150 years, but the root system persists, continuously sending up new growth, achieving a kind of immortality through cloning. Certain animals can survive being completely dried out. Tardigrades can enter a state called cryptobiosis, where they lose nearly all their water content, becoming almost completely desiccated. In this state, they can survive for decades, enduring extremes of temperature, radiation, and pressure that would destroy almost any other organism. When water returns, they rehydrate and resume normal activity within hours, as if no time has passed. This ability has made tardigrades subjects of space research, as they represent some of the toughest life forms known and might provide insights into how life could survive on other planets. Some waterfalls flow upward during hurricanes. When hurricane force winds hit coastal cliffs, the updrafts can be powerful enough to reverse waterfalls completely, sending water streaming upward instead of down. The effect is dramatic but temporary, lasting only as long as the strongest winds persist. Photographers have captured stunning images of these reversed falls, with water defying gravity and disappearing into the sky as mist. Once the winds subside, gravity reasserts itself, and the falls resume their normal downward flow. There are entire ecosystems living in the clouds. In tropical mountain forests, clouds engulf the vegetation for much of the year, and unique ecosystems have evolved to thrive in this constant mist. These cloud forests are draped in moss, epiphytes, and ferns that absorb moisture directly from the air. Animals from cloud forest frogs to specialized insects live nowhere else. The constant moisture creates a world unlike lowland rainforests, cooler and perpetually damp, where clouds themselves become a defining feature of the habitat, providing water even during dry seasons. Certain birds use tools to make other tools. New Caledonian crows don't just use tools. They craft sophisticated implements and sometimes make tools to obtain other tools they'll need later. They've been observed creating hooked twigs to extract insects, then using those insects as bait to catch larger prey. This forward planning and multi-step tool use suggests these birds can think ahead, imagining future needs and preparing for them, a level of cognition that was once considered uniquely human, but that continues to be discovered in unexpected corners of the animal kingdom. Some forests can exist hundreds of meters above the ground. In the mist-shrouded mountains of tropical regions, entire forests grow on the branches of giant trees. These sky gardens consist of thousands of epiphytic plants, mosses, ferns, and even small trees growing in pockets of soil that accumulate in branch forks. Some of these aerial forests are so dense that they support their own populations of earthworms, snails, and insects that never descend to the ground. It's a forest above the forest, a layer of life hidden in the canopy, thriving in the space between earth and sky. There are deserts where it's been decades since the last rainfall. In the Atacama Desert of Chile, some weather stations have never recorded measurable rainfall. The desert lies in a double rain shadow, blocked by the Andes Mountains to the east and cold ocean currents offshore that prevent moisture from reaching the land. Parts of the Atacama are considered the driest places on Earth, more arid even than some parts of Antarctica. Yet even here, life persists in the form of hardy lichens, bacteria living inside rocks, and animals that can extract all needed moisture from fog that occasionally rolls in from the coast. Certain lakes have underwater forests of trees that died centuries ago. When valleys are flooded to create reservoirs, the submerged forests sometimes remain standing underwater, preserved by the cold, oxygen-poor water. Divers exploring these ghost forests describe swimming through landscapes frozen in time, with dead trees still standing upright, their bark long gone, but their trunks intact. These sunken woodlands create unique habitats for fish and other aquatic life, and the eerie sight of a forest underwater serves as a haunting reminder of what was lost when the valley was flooded. Some stones move across the desert floor on their own. In Death Valley's racetrack playa, rocks weighing up to hundreds of pounds slide across the flat desert surface, leaving long trails behind them. For decades, no one had witnessed the movement, making it one of nature's most puzzling mysteries. Finally, researchers discovered that on rare winter nights, thin sheets of ice form on the playa after rain. When the sun rises and the ice begins to melt and break apart, light winds push the floating ice sheets, which in turn push the rocks embedded in them. The movement is so slow and the conditions so specific that it happens only a few times per decade, creating trails that can persist for years before wind erases them. There are flowers that track the sun even on cloudy days. While sunflowers are famous for following the sun across the sky, they can do this even when clouds block direct sunlight. The plants detect the overall direction of light in the sky and adjust their orientation accordingly. Young sunflowers face east at dawn and track westward throughout the day, then reorient to the east overnight. This movement is controlled by different growth rates on opposite sides of the stem, with the shaded side growing slightly faster. Once the flower matures and blooming begins, it stops tracking and remains facing east, warming up quickly in the morning sun to attract early pollinators. Certain fish can breathe air and survive out of water for days. The lungfish of Africa, South America, and Australia have primitive lungs in addition to gills, allowing them to breathe air when their pools dry up. African lungfish can burrow into mud and create a mucus cocoon around themselves, surviving in a dormant state for months or even years until rain returns. They breathe through a small opening to the surface, waiting patiently for conditions to improve. This remarkable adaptation has allowed lungfish to survive virtually unchanged for nearly 400 million years, making them living fossils that bridge the gap between fish and the first land-dwelling vertebrates. Some clouds are made of ice crystals so tiny they float like dust. Cirrus clouds form at altitudes above 6,000 meters, where temperatures are well below freezing. They're composed entirely of ice crystals so small and light that they can remain suspended in the air for hours or days. These clouds often appear as delicate wisps or mare's tails, and they can signal changing weather as they're often pushed ahead of approaching warm fronts. The ice crystals in cirrus clouds can create optical effects like halos around the sun and moon, bending light into rings and arcs that have inspired folklore and wonder throughout human history. There are animals that can regrow their heads. Some species of flatworms and sea slugs can regenerate their entire bodies from just a severed head. Even more remarkably, some sea slugs will intentionally detach their own heads, leaving their bodies behind. The head then grows a completely new body over several weeks, while the old body gradually dies. Scientists believe this extreme behavior may help the animals rid themselves of parasites or damaged tissue. The ability to regrow complex organs, digestive systems, and even hearts from just head tissue represents one of the most extreme regenerative abilities in the animal kingdom. Certain lakes freeze so clear you can see straight through to the bottom. In some cold, calm lakes with very pure water, ice can form so transparently that you can see fish swimming beneath your feet as you walk across it. Lake Baikal in Siberia is famous for this phenomenon, with ice sometimes forming in sheets so clear they're like walking on glass. The ice can also create dramatic formations, with pressure cracks forming geometric patterns and bubbles of methane from the lake bottom, frozen in place as they rise. Standing on such ice can be disorienting, looking down through meters of frozen water to the lake bed below. Some trees can live with their tops completely dead. Bristle-cone pines and other trees in the harsh environments often have only a thin strip of living bark connecting their roots to a few living branches. The rest of the tree, sometimes 90% or more, can be dead wood, bleached white by sun and wind. This adaptation allows the tree to survive when conditions become too harsh to support the entire crown. By reducing the living tissue to the bare minimum, the tree can persist through droughts and cold that would kill a fully living tree, waiting for better conditions to expand its living area again. There are rivers that run red with iron. In some locations, natural iron deposits or acid mine drainage can turn rivers and streams bright orange or red. The Rio Tinto in Spain flows red and acidic due to iron dissolved from mineral deposits. Despite the harsh chemistry, extremophile bacteria and algae thrive in these waters, some of them actually deriving energy from breaking down the iron compounds. These crimson rivers look alien and inhospitable, yet they support unique ecosystems and provide scientists with insights into how life might exist in extreme environments on other planets. Certain birds can remember where they buried thousands of seeds. Clark's nutcrackers and other corvids cache seeds throughout their territory, in thousands of different locations each fall. Remarkably, they can remember the locations of most of these caches months later, even when they're buried under snow. They use landmarks and spatial memory to create mental maps of incredible detail. This ability isn't just impressive, it's ecologically important. The seeds they forget become the next generation of trees, making these birds essential forest planters across mountain regions of the western United States. Some glaciers contain perfectly preserved ancient forests. As glaciers advance, they can overrun forests, encasing trees in ice and preserving them. When the glaciers later retreat, these trees are revealed, sometimes still standing upright, their wood perfectly preserved after thousands of years. In Alaska and Patagonia, glacial retreat has exposed ancient stumps and logs that can be carbon dated to determine when the ice advanced. These wooden time capsules provide scientists with information about past climates and forest compositions, showing what grew there before the ice came. There are animals that can survive the vacuum of space. Tardigrades have been exposed to the vacuum of space aboard satellites and survived, enduring conditions that would kill virtually any other organism. They can withstand the radiation, extreme temperatures, and lack of pressure and oxygen by entering cryptobiosis. In experiments, tardigrades exposed to space for several days were successfully revived and went on to reproduce normally. This extraordinary resilience has made scientists wonder whether life could survive interplanetary travel, hitchhiking on meteors or spacecraft between worlds. Certain waterfalls create permanent rainbows. Waterfalls with consistent mist and the right orientation to the sun can produce rainbows that appear nearly every sunny day. Victoria Falls in Africa and Yosemite Falls in California regularly display brilliant rainbows, sometimes even lunar rainbows at night when the moon is full and bright enough. The constant spray creates conditions where light is continuously refracted through water droplets, painting arcs of color that shift and shimmer, but never quite disappear as long as sun and mist coincide. Some plants can pull water from fog. In coastal deserts and cloud forests, some plants have evolved to harvest moisture from fog even when no rain falls. Their leaves have specialized structures that cause fog droplets to condense and run down to the roots. The redwood trees of coastal California can absorb significant water through their needles when fog rolls in. supplementing what their roots take from soil. In the Namib Desert, beetles collect fog on their backs and channel it to their mouths. This fog harvesting allows life to persist in places that would otherwise be too dry, turning air moisture into a vital water source. There are caves where the walls move and breathe. In some caves, formations are so delicate and thin that they move perceptibly in response to air currents. Cave curtains and helictites can be so fragile that even a person's breath can set them swaying. In Wind Cave and other large systems, the cave itself breathes, with air flowing in and out of entrances as barometric pressure outside changes. During certain conditions, the wind rushing through passages can be strong enough to blow out candles or make whistling sounds, as if the earth itself were inhaling and exhaling through stone lungs. Certain fish glow in colors that only they can see. Some reef fish have biofluorescent patterns that they can see, but many predators cannot. Under blue light, these patterns glow in reds, oranges, and greens, creating signals visible to other members of their species who have the right visual receptors. Since many predators can't see these wavelengths, the fish can communicate and identify each other without alerting danger. Researchers with special cameras have revealed that coral reefs are far more colorful than human eyes perceive, glowing with hidden patterns in a light show invisible to us. Some mountains are hollow. Volcanic mountains often contain extensive cave systems formed by lava tubes, chambers where magma once flowed. As the outer lava cooled and hardened, molten rock continued flowing inside, eventually draining away and leaving tunnels behind. Some of these lava tubes are enormous, large enough to drive vehicles through. Mount Etna, Kilauea, and other volcanoes have miles of these underground passages. Exploring them reveals a hidden architecture inside the mountain, rooms and corridors created by fire, and now cool and dark, sometimes decorated with frozen lava formations. There are animals that can walk on ceilings. Geckos are famous for their ability to climb smooth vertical surfaces and even walk upside down on ceilings. This ability comes from millions of tiny hairs on their toe pads called setae, each of which branches into hundreds of even smaller spatulae. These structures create molecular attractions called van der Waals forces with the surface, essentially allowing the gecko to stick through atomic interactions. Each foot can support many times the gecko's weight, and the adhesion works on almost any surface, wet or dry, smooth or rough. Certain rivers disappear and reappear multiple times along their course. In karst landscapes riddled with caves and sinkholes, rivers can vanish underground, flow through cave systems for miles, emerge briefly at a spring, then disappear again. The Lost River in Indiana does exactly this, surfacing and vanishing several times along its length. Tracing the underground portions often requires dye tests, where colored dye is poured in where the river sinks, and observers watch for it to reappear downstream. These hidden waterways can take surprising routes, sometimes emerging miles from where they disappeared and flowing in unexpected directions. Some animals never stop growing their entire lives. Sharks, many fish, and some reptiles exhibit indeterminate growth, continuing to grow larger as long as they live. A lobster, if it could avoid predators, disease, and other hazards, could theoretically grow indefinitely, becoming larger each time it molts its shell. The oldest lobsters on record weighed over 20 kilograms and were estimated to be over 100 years old. This continuous growth means that in species that live long enough, the largest individuals can become giants, their size itself a measure of how long they've survived. There are forests that exist entirely underground, In some cave systems, tree roots from the surface penetrate deep into the ground, reaching cave ceilings and even hanging down into chambers. In a few remarkable cases, these roots form dense networks inside the cave, creating an inverted forest hanging from above. Cave explorers have described chambers where they had to push through tangles of roots, feeling like they were moving through an upside-down woodland. These subterranean root systems can extend surprisingly far from the surface trees, seeking water deep in the earth. Certain clouds form their own ecosystems. Microbes, fungi, bacteria, and even small organisms live in clouds, feeding on organic particles carried up from the surface. These cloud-dwelling microorganisms can influence cloud formation and precipitation, as some bacteria serve as nucleation points around which water droplets form. Scientists have sampled clouds and found diverse communities of living things drifting through the sky, raising questions about whether clouds are simply water and air, or if they're also habitats for aerial life that we're only beginning to understand. Some animals can sense earthquakes hours before they strike. While the mechanism isn't fully understood, many animals show unusual behavior before earthquakes. Elephants have been observed moving to higher ground before tsunamis. Birds abandon their nests en masse. Dogs bark frantically and refuse to go indoors. Theories suggest they may detect subtle vibrations, changes in electromagnetic fields, or the release of radon gas from stressed rocks. In China and Japan, earthquake observation programs include monitoring animal behavior as one of many potential early warning signs. There are lakes that turn to jelly. In some lakes, seasonal blooms of certain algae or bacteria can make the water thick and gelatinous. The organisms produce mucilage, a slimy protective coating that accumulates until the water feels more like swimming through gelatin than liquid. While not harmful, swimming in these jelly-like lakes is an unusual sensation. The phenomenon usually occurs in warm, nutrient-rich water and disappears when conditions change. These temporary transformations show how quickly aquatic ecosystems can shift from one state to another. Certain trees have bark that's fireproof. Cork oak and some eucalyptus species have bark so thick and insulating that it can protect the living wood beneath from even intense fires. Sequoia bark can be over 30 centimeters thick and is filled with tannins that make it fire-resistant. After a wildfire, these trees may be scorched on the outside but alive underneath. In fact, many of these trees depend on periodic fires to clear competing vegetation and trigger seed release, having evolved not just to survive fire, but to use it as part of their reproductive strategy. Some rivers carry more water underground than on the surface. In the Amazon basin, a massive underground river system called the Hamza flows beneath the Amazon River itself. While moving much more slowly than the surface river, it's comparable in scale, with some estimates suggesting it moves thousands of cubic meters of water per second through porous rock layers. This subsurface flow wasn't even confirmed until the 21st century, showing that even in well-studied regions, major features of Earth's hydrology can remain hidden for centuries. There are animals that can flatten themselves to almost two-dimensional. Octopuses can compress their boneless bodies to fit through any opening larger than their hard beak, which is the only rigid part of their anatomy. This allows them to squeeze through impossibly small gaps in rocks or escape from containers through tiny holes. Their bodies are so flexible that large octopuses have escaped from aquarium tanks by flattening themselves and flowing through gaps just a couple of centimeters wide, a feat that seems impossible for an animal that can weigh 50 kilograms or more. Certain mountains trap clouds and create permanent fog zones. In tropical and subtropical mountains, specific elevations experience near constant cloud cover. These cloud forests exist in a narrow band of altitude, where temperature and moisture conditions cause clouds to form and linger. The trees and plants are adapted to constant dampness, draped in mosses and epiphytes that rarely experience direct sun. The fog is so consistent that it defines the entire ecosystem, with species that can only survive in this perpetual mist, unable to live either higher or lower on the mountain. Some insects can survive being frozen in ice. The woolly bear caterpillar in the Arctic can freeze solid for months during winter. Its body produces cryoprotectants, chemicals that prevent ice crystals from damaging its cells. When spring arrives, it thaws, continues eating, and eventually pupads. Some individuals may go through this freeze-thaw cycle multiple times over several years before finally transforming into a moth. This extended life cycle is one of the longest for any butterfly or moth, with the caterpillar stage sometimes lasting over a decade. There are beaches where the sand is green. Papakolea Beach in Hawaii is one of the few green sand beaches in the world, its color coming from olivine crystals, a semi-precious stone also known as peridot. The olivine comes from a nearby volcanic cinder cone that eroded over time, releasing the heavy green crystals which accumulated on the beach. The result is a startling olive green shore that looks painted. Other green beaches exist in Guam and the Galapagos, each created by local geology that concentrates green minerals on the shore. Certain fish can survive in water so acidic it would burn human skin. In volcanic lakes and acid mine drainage, some fish have evolved to tolerate pH levels that would be fatal to most organisms. They produce special mucus coatings and have modified gill structures that prevent the acid from damaging their tissues. These extremophile fish live in waters that can be as acidic as lemon juice, thriving in conditions that seem incompatible with complex life, yet finding niches even in Earth's most chemically hostile aquatic environments. Some plants can survive with almost no nutrients. Carnivorous plants evolved in nutrient-poor soils, but even they need some minerals from the ground. However, some plants in the most barren locations can survive on almost nothing. Lithops, or living stones, grow in deserts where soil is nearly absent, living on trace minerals and storing water in their thick leaves. Some lichens grow on bare rock with no soil at all, slowly breaking down the stone itself to extract the minerals they need, demonstrating that even in near total absence of resources, life finds ways to persist. There are clouds that can survive for days in the same spot. Lenticular clouds that form over mountains can remain nearly stationary for hours or even days, maintaining their shape even as wind rushes through them. They form continuously on the upwind side as moist air rises over the peak, and they evaporate on the downwind side as air descends and warms. To someone watching, the cloud appears frozen in place, a permanent feature hovering over the summit, while in reality, it's constantly forming and dissolving, like a waterfall that holds its shape while the water flows through it. Certain birds can migrate across entire oceans without stopping. The bar-tailed godwit holds the record for the longest non-stop flight, traveling over 11,000 kilometers from Alaska to New Zealand without landing, eating, or drinking. the journey takes about 8 days of continuous flying, during which the birds rely entirely on stored fat for energy. They can shut down parts of their digestive systems during flight to save weight and energy, essentially transforming their bodies into flying machines optimized for this single incredible journey. Some caves contain crystals that grew continuously for millions of years. The giant crystals in Mexico's Cave of Crystals grew in a stable environment where temperature and mineral content remained constant for roughly 500,000 years. The largest selenite crystals are over 11 meters long and weigh dozens of tons. They grew incredibly slowly, adding microscopic layers year after year in the warm, mineral-rich water that filled the cave. When miners accidentally pumped out the water in 2000, they revealed a chamber that had been growing its crystal forest in darkness and warmth for longer than humans have existed as a species. There are rivers that glow with bioluminescence. In some tropical rivers, bioluminescent organisms create glowing patches in the water. In New Zealand's Waitomo caves, glowworms create a constellation effect on the cave ceiling. But in Jamaica's luminous lagoon, dinoflagellates make the entire river glow when disturbed. Swimming in these waters means every movement creates swirls of blue-green light, and fish leave glowing trails as they dart away. The effect is strongest on moonless nights when the darkness makes even faint bioluminescence visible. Certain animals can change color faster than you can blink. Cuttlefish and some octopuses can shift their colors and patterns in milliseconds, faster than the human eye can follow. They do this through millions of chromatophore cells in their skin that expand or contract under muscle and nerve control. The color changes can ripple across their bodies in waves, creating dynamic displays used for camouflage, communication, and hunting. Watching a cuttlefish change patterns is mesmerizing, like seeing a living television screen that thinks and reacts to its surroundings. Some deserts have fish that live in isolated pools. In Death Valley and other deserts, tiny populations of poopfish survive in isolated springs and pools that are remnants of ancient lakes. These fish have been separated from each other for thousands of years, evolving into distinct species found nowhere else on Earth. Some pools are just a few meters across, yet they support entire populations that have adapted to warm, salty, or alkaline water that would kill most fish. These desert fish are among the rarest vertebrates on the planet, their entire species existing in areas smaller than a swimming pool. There are mountains that are younger than the oldest trees. While most mountains are millions of years old, volcanic peaks can form in just years or decades. Pericotin in Mexico erupted from a cornfield in 1943 and grew to over 400 meters tall within a year. Surtsey near Iceland rose from the ocean in 1963 and continues to be studied as an example of how new land is colonized by life. These young mountains remind us that geological processes we think of as taking eons can sometimes happen within human lifetimes, reshaping landscapes faster than forests can grow. Certain plants can reverse the aging of their cells. Some plants can rejuvenate old tissue, transforming aged cells back into younger, actively dividing cells. This allows them to continuously produce new growth from old wood, essentially resetting parts of themselves. While animals have a fixed developmental path where cells age and die, plants can maintain populations of stem cells indefinitely and can even convert mature tissue back to a younger state. This cellular flexibility is one reason why plants can live so much longer than most animals, continuously renewing themselves from within. Some animals build structures visible from space. Coral reefs, built by tiny polyps over thousands of years, can be enormous. The Great Barrier Reef stretches over 2,300 kilometers and is visible from orbit. Termite mounds in Africa and Australia, while much smaller, create patterns across the landscape that are detectable from satellites. Beaver dams can alter watersheds so extensively that the effects are visible in satellite imagery. These animal architects reshape entire landscapes through collective effort over generations, leaving marks that can be seen from space. There are places where rain falls upward. In intense updrafts within powerful thunderstorms, raindrops can be carried upward instead of falling. These updrafts, sometimes exceeding 160 kilometers per hour, can lift water droplets back up into the freezing levels of the cloud where they freeze into hail. The hailstones can then fall and be caught by another updraft, gaining another layer of ice. This cycle can repeat multiple times, creating hailstones with concentric layers like tree rings, each ring representing another trip up and down inside the storm. Certain fungi can survive in nuclear reactor cores. Some fungi not only tolerate high radiation, but actually seem to thrive on it. Black fungi growing on the walls of the destroyed Chernobyl reactor appear to use melanin to capture radiation energy, possibly even growing faster in radioactive environments. This radiosynthesis, if confirmed, would be a form of energy capture completely different from photosynthesis, showing that life can find ways to exploit even the most hostile and unusual energy sources. And so, our journey through the quieter corners of nature draws to a gentle close. We've wandered through hidden worlds, from rivers that run beneath the sea to forests that float and drift, from animals that see colors beyond imagination to plants that count, remember, and communicate in ways we're only beginning to understand. We've seen deserts bloom and glaciers that hold ancient air, mountains that grow and waterfalls that flow upward, fish that walk and birds that sleep on the wing. These stories remind us that mystery and wonder don't exist only in distant galaxies or ancient history. They're woven into the fabric of our living planet, happening all around us, often in places we walk past every day without noticing. A forest breathing clouds into the sky, a fish that walks on land when the tide retreats, a mountain still growing, millimeter by millimeter, pushing toward the sun. A tiny organism that can survive the vacuum of space, a tree that has stood for thousands of years, older than empires. Some of these facts might stay with you like the echo of a distant song. Others might fade as you drift toward sleep. And that's perfectly fine. The world will still be here tomorrow, still turning, still full of secrets waiting to be discovered or simply to exist. Unnoticed, but no less real. The stones will still be sliding across the desert floor on their rare winter nights. The bioluminescent bays will still be glowing when hands disturb the water. The underground rivers will still be carving their dark passages through limestone. The pupfish will still be swimming in their tiny desert pools. The cuttlefish will still be changing colors faster than eyes can follow. And somewhere, a seed that has waited for decades will finally feel the rain and begin to grow. If you're still awake, you can let your mind wander to the next video or to whatever thoughts are calling you. But if sleep is pulling at you, if your eyelids are heavy and your breathing has slowed, then let go. Let these stories carry you gently into dreams. The ancient trees will still be standing. The caves will still be breathing. The mountains will still be rising, grain by grain, year by year. The rivers will still be finding their way to the sea, whether above ground or below. And when you wake, perhaps you'll see the world around you a little differently, knowing that beneath every surface, behind every familiar sight, nature is working its patient magic, creating beauty and wonder that never really ends. Every drop of water holding millions of lives. Every handful of soil concealing more organisms than there are people on Earth. Every cloud potentially home to drifting microbes. Every mountain slowly rising or wearing away. Every living thing connected to every other through webs of relationships we're only beginning to map. The world is far stranger, far more alive, far more interconnected than it appears at first glance. And tonight, you've glimpsed just a few of its infinite mysteries. Thank you for spending this time here, in this quiet space where nature's secrets unfold like petals in the morning sun. May these wonders follow you into your dreams, and may you wake refreshed, ready to see the world with new eyes. Rest well, knowing that the earth itself is resting too, and renewing, and continuing its slow dance through space, carrying all of us and all these miracles along for the journey. Good night.